What happened to America's most dangerous inmates in Pelican Bay? The alarm pierced through Pelican Bay before dawn, screeching down the concrete hallways of the Security Housing Unit, the SHU. Officers streamed down the tier, boots pounding against steel floors, radios crackling with clipped voices. The SHU was never quiet, but today's alarms felt different. Sharper. Urgent. Warden Samuel Cortez arrived moments later. 20 years working inside high-security prisons had given him a sixth sense, a way of reading the air before he read the reports. And this morning, the air felt colder than usual, as if something inside the SHU had shifted overnight. What triggered it? Cortez asked, stepping through the steel sally port. Lieutenant Monroe checked his tablet. Inmate in cell B-224 didn't respond during welfare check. Cortez stiffened. B-224 belonged to an inmate classified as administrative high risk, one of the individuals housed inside the SHU not because of recent behavior, but because of what investigators believed he once coordinated from general population across California. Open it, Cortez ordered. A team unlocked the steel door. Inside, the cell was spotless, bed made, floor swept, everything aligned with military precision. But the inmate was gone. Not transferred. Not escorted. Gone. Cortez stepped inside, his breath fogging slightly in the cold air. The corners were clean. The vent was sealed. The slit windows were bolted. The camera in the upper corner blinked red, recording like normal. Check playback, Cortez said. Monroe tapped the tablet. The footage showed the inmate at lights out the night before, sitting on the concrete floor, back straight, face expressionless. Then the lights cut for nightly power rotation. When the system came back online 20 minutes later, the cell was empty. How does someone vanish from a sealed SHU cell? Monroe muttered. Cortez ignored him and scanned the bed frame. Something small caught his attention. A thin sheet of folded paper tucked beneath the mattress. He pulled it free. Inside, written in a controlled, steady script, was a single line. The silence is beginning again. Cortez felt his pulse rise. The phrase was familiar, from archived reports involving inmates who had once organized statewide hunger strikes, communication shutdowns, and coordinated pressure campaigns within the SHU. The phrase had appeared in notes confiscated before those events, hinting at movements happening behind the scenes. But those events were years ago. Reforms had followed. The SHU cell cycle program had been dismantled. Many long-term solitary placements had been reviewed or ended. So why was the phrase appearing again? Cortez turned to Monroe. Get me every log for the last 24 hours. Every escort. Every meal tray. Every welfare check. We already pulled them, sir, Monroe said quietly. The logs say the inmate never left his cell. Cortez exhaled slowly. Then the logs are wrong. He moved down the tier, stopping at a nearby cell where another SHU inmate stood at the door, staring. Not speaking. Just watching. Cortez approached. Did you hear anything last night? A long pause. Then the inmate whispered, We heard everything. Explain. The man looked straight ahead. Doors don't open in the SHU without sound. Last night, the hallway was silent. Too silent. Like the building was listening. Cortez frowned. What do you mean listening? The inmate stepped back into the dimness of his cell. You're asking the wrong questions, Warden. You shouldn't be asking how he left. You should be asking why he was taken. Taken. The word echoed in Cortez's mind. He walked back toward the control station. The SHU was designed for total control, isolation so deep that even communication between cells was nearly impossible. Yet over the years, investigators had uncovered evidence of coded letters, vent-to-vent messages, and strategic slowdowns that proved something dangerous. Even isolation couldn't fully silence certain inmates. Inside the control pod, Monroe pulled up a new screen. Sir, we found something on the camera system. The monitor displayed the hallway camera outside B-224. At 2:14 a.m., the hallway was dark. The lights were set to night mode. Nothing moved. Then, for exactly 4 seconds, the video feed became discolored, not black, not static, but tinted red. When the image returned, A faint shadow shifted near the cell door. No figure. No footsteps. Just a presence. Could be a glitch, Monroe said, though his tone betrayed his doubt. Cortez nodded slowly. Maybe. But glitches didn't write notes. Glitches didn't erase inmates from locked cells. Glitches didn't know the phrase, "The silence is beginning again." He opened the evidence bag again, looking closely at the paper. The handwriting was calm, controlled, almost meditative. The work of someone who understood the weight of time inside the SHU. Someone with discipline strong enough to endure years of isolation. "Get maintenance down here," Cortez ordered. "We're checking every vent and every cavity in this block." As officers spread out, Monroe approached with another file. "Sir, you need to see this." It was a report from 6 months earlier, a SHU inmate removed after investigators linked him to renewed communication networks involving multiple California prisons. Not violence. Not attacks. But influence. Messages. Quiet coordination that had made the state nervous enough to intervene. The removed inmate? He had lived in cell B223, right next to the now empty B224. Cortez's pulse quickened. 2 cells, he whispered. 2 high-risk inmates. Both connected to old SHU influence networks. He looked toward the end of the hallway, suddenly feeling the pressure of 1,000 unasked questions. "What exactly happened in this block?" he murmured, before the silence returned. And when a maintenance officer pried open the lower vent panel, what they found changed everything. The metal vent panel slid free with a dry scrape, releasing a gust of cold, stale air. Dust drifted into the hallway like gray snow. Cortez knelt beside the opening, shining his flashlight into the black cavity. The beam illuminated nothing at first, just concrete walls hardened by decades of isolation. Then something glinted. "Sir, there's something inside," the maintenance officer murmured. Cortez reached in carefully, fingers brushing against a smooth object tucked deep in the corner. He gripped it and pulled hard. The item slid free, a flattened, meticulously folded piece of plastic, thin and transparent. A contraband binder sleeve. Inside it rested a stack of handwritten papers. Monroe let out a low whistle. How did that get in there? These vents haven't been accessible since the renovation. Cortez unfolded the top sheet. The handwriting matched the note from B224, precise, composed, almost eerily calm. The first page held a diagram, a layered structure of Pelican Bay's SHU floors, each level marked with dots and arrows. Not escape routes. Not contraband paths. Communication pathways. "These are message channels," Cortez whispered. Monroe leaned closer. "Those routes don't exist. Cells aren't connected like this." Cortez flipped the page. The next sheet showed numbers, cell numbers, connected in branching lines. The lines ended with a coded phrase. Phase 1, re-establish contact. His jaw tightened. The SHU was designed to crush communication. But someone had been rebuilding it. Monroe exhaled. "Sir, this looks like a network." "No," Cortez said quietly. "This looks like the old network." Memories surged, archived reports from years earlier, documenting how inmates in Pelican Bay's SHU had coordinated hunger strikes that spread to multiple facilities statewide. They had done it in silence, letters hidden in law books, messages whispered through vents, coded taps on steel doors. The hunger strikes had forced reforms. They'd changed isolation policies across California. They'd reached the governor's office. But this was different. This was covert, hidden, strategic. Cortez flipped to the third sheet. A short sentence stared back at him. "The silence has returned because pressure has returned." Monroe stepped back. "Pressure?" Cortez nodded slowly. "Transfers. Policy shifts. Increased restrictions. Whatever the reason, something has made these inmates react again." A radio crackled. "Lieutenant Monroe, Unit D Block requests you immediately. There's an issue." Monroe's face drained. "We'll be right there." Cortez tucked the papers into an evidence pouch and hurried after him. D Block was on the far side of the SHU, another wing built with the same extreme isolation philosophy. When they arrived, Two officers stood pale and confused outside cell D-112. What happened? Cortez demanded. The junior officer swallowed hard. Sir, we conducted a routine check. The inmate was standing at the door. Not unusual. But when we asked him to step back, he said. The officer hesitated. He said, it's already started. Started? Cortez pressed. What has started? Before the officer could answer, the inmate inside the cell stepped into view, eyes locked with Cortez's through the narrow window. He spoke calmly, almost kindly. You found the vent notes? He said. Good. Cortez approached the door. Who left them? The inmate smiled faintly. Someone who understood how far this building's memory stretches. What does that mean? Cortez asked. The inmate leaned close. When pressure rises, the SHU listens. And it responds. Cortez felt the hair on his arms rise. Responds how? The inmate tilted his head. There are those who disappear because they're forgotten. And those who disappear because they're needed. Cortez stared into the man's eyes. You're telling me someone took him? The inmate whispered, they didn't take him. They returned him. Before Cortez or Monroe could respond, the inmate sat back on his bed and said nothing more. Monroe muttered, Sir, do we have to get answers? Cortez nodded. We will. Starting with the logs. Back in the SHU control room, Cortez commanded access to the internal movement database, the system that tracked every escort, every medical check, every meal delivery. No inmate left a SHU cell without generating data. But as the digital report loaded, Monroe's eyes widened. Sir, do we have missing scans? Cortez froze. Missing? Yes. Look, last night between 2 o'clock and 2:20 a.m., 3 staff IDs were used to access multiple SHU doors. But none of those staff members were on duty at the time. Cortez ran his fingers across his forehead. Someone cloned their IDs. Monroe exhaled hard. They walked right through the SHU. Undetected. No, Cortez said darkly. They walked through the SHU because they knew exactly where to go. He pulled the vent notes back out. Flipped to the last page. A final message read. When the time comes, the SHU will choose. Monroe whispered, choose what? Cortez looked up, eyes narrowing at the map of the SHU glowing on the monitor. It's not choosing. It's guiding. The SHU wasn't the battleground. It was the instrument. Someone was using the structure itself, its blind spots, its forgotten rooms, its old vent lines, to move selectively through the block. And whoever was taken, Cortez said, voice low and steady, was taken because they have a role to play. He closed the evidence pouch. But what role? Depends on who controls the silence. At that moment, an officer burst into the room. Warden, cell B-223 just activated the emergency call button. Cortez stepped forward. That cell was empty, he said. Who's in it now? The officer swallowed. We don't know, sir. The door is locked, but someone is inside. Cortez stared in shock. That's impossible. But when they reached cell B-223 and opened the small viewing hatch, what they saw waiting in the darkness changed everything. The metal viewing hatch clanked open, and a cold breath of air seeped from cell B-223. Cortez pressed his eye to the narrow slit, expecting darkness. Instead, a figure sat perfectly still on the lower bunk. Back straight, hands on his knees, eyes open. Not the original inmate. That man had been transferred months ago during earlier reforms. This was someone else. Someone who shouldn't be here. Cortez's voice barely rose above a whisper. Who moved him into this cell? Lieutenant Monroe swallowed hard. No movement logged, sir. No escort. No authorization. The system shows the cell as empty. The inmate slowly lifted his head. His gaze was calm, steady, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Cortez opened the door. The inmate did not stand. He simply spoke one sentence. The silence has chosen. Cortez stepped inside, keeping his tone firm. Who are you? The inmate looked up. Someone who was never supposed to be heard. Did you leave this cell before? Cortez asked. I never left, the man said. You just forgot how to look. Cortez exchanged a glance with Monroe, a silent agreement to keep pressing. What happened in B-224? Cortez. Where is the inmate who vanished? The man breathed in slowly, the way someone does when choosing each word with purpose. He understood the pathways, the vents, the forgotten lines, and he understood why the pressure returned. Why did it return? Cortez demanded. The inmate finally stood, stepping into the icy glow of the hallway lights. Because the reforms stopped the noise, he said. But they never stopped the roots. Cortez felt a chill. He knew what the man meant. Years earlier, Pelican Bay's SHU had been the center of a historic hunger strike, thousands of inmates across California refusing food to protest indefinite isolation. Their actions had triggered investigations, lawsuits, reforms, and the dismantling of long-term solitary placements. Many SHU inmates had been moved back into general population, but pressure had a way of rebuilding itself. What do the vent notes mean? Cortez. What is Phase 1? Phase 2? The man shook his head gently. You see phases because you see chaos. But this isn't chaos. This is balance. Cortez stepped forward. Balance of what? The inmate turned toward the back wall of the cell, toward a small, patched-over vent panel. The SHU has always been two things, he said quietly. The cage. And a message. Wait until you see what happens when the next one starts. Hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started.